Dear friend, my name is Samuel Ayim of CTL Africa Leadership, and I would like to invite you to our free weekly webinar, The Leadership Platform. The Leadership Platform is your space for learning everything leadership and personal development. We have been holding the Leadership Platform for the last 3.5 years every week, and thousands of leaders from all walks of life have benefited from the rich lessons from experienced leaders. As the year goes on, we are going to bring you even more enriching content. We're going to have a session called Leaders Are Readers, where every month we will bring you a book that all participants will be encouraged to read. We will share the summary of those lessons for you to guide you. We will also bring you a session on meeting with a CEO, where we will bring an experienced CEO from any industry to share their story and their lessons as leaders. Again, we will bring you the extraordinary leadership stories, where we scout out for emerging entrepreneurs and leaders doing extraordinary things in different fields to inspire you to do better. And of course, we will bring you the normal topics in leadership and personal development that would enrich your leadership. So I hope you make a date with us, CTL Africa, every Saturday, 7 p.m. on the Leadership Platform, live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. On our YouTube, you can also check some of the previous lessons for free. Make a date with us, CTL Africa, on the Leadership Platform, this and every Saturday at 7 p.m. Hello. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Leadership Platform. My name is Samuel Ayim of CTL Africa Leadership, and I'm excited to be with you. Those of you who join, you know that this is my best part of the week, my favorite time, when I get to meet all of you who are yearning to learn to grow in your leadership and your personal development. And I'm happy to be with you this evening. Quick announcement. We encourage you to go on our social media, on our website, and register for Live to Lead 2024. Those of you who have joined Live to Lead, you know that this is the most powerful session of leadership across the world, held in 300 locations every year, led by John C. Maxwell. And we're giving a discount for group buys for corporates that are bringing their leaders. So we encourage you to register now. We also encourage you to register for the growth journey, the 9th cohort. We started last week, but it's not too late if you want to join the 9th cohort. It's a 10-week program where we are taking you on a journey on how to develop yourself and your leadership. We're basing it on John C. Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, and it will enrich you. Several executives and professionals of all walks have gone through. We've graduated more than 80 executives on this program, and we encourage you to join. We also encourage you to join our Leaders Are Readers session this month. We are reading Robin Sharma's book, The Leader Who Had No Title. The Leader Who Had No Title. This is the book for June. Please read with us, and at the end of the month, we will come and share the summary of the lessons with you. All right. So on that note, I encourage all of you who have joined to please introduce yourself. We love to know you are joining us from wherever you are. Please introduce yourself. Also invite your friends, your colleagues, your bosses to join us on the leadership platform. Share the link with them. Subscribe to our YouTube channels. Like our Facebook page right now so that others will join. Right. So let me see who is on the platform. I have Mami Ajua Pra. He says excited for another episode. Thank you very much. Gerard Foucault from Accra, here to learn and share. Theophilus Apia Wilson is excited to be here. Mami Ajua Pra and Theophilus, okay, Portia Amonu, Boatin from Tema, Kwame JB joining from the UK, Gideon Degbe, lifetime chairman, time with the chairman of UBA Ghana. He's excited to be here. Right. Prince Amwakon is ready for yet another insightful lessons. All right. So thank you all for joining. Keep on introducing yourself. We'll come back to you. But for now, I'm going to just bring, because we're going to have a lot more about him in the discussions. We are not going to spend the time to read his profile, but I say he's my boss. I serve with him on the UBA board, and he's inspired me a lot, and I've learned so much from him. Mr. Awotwi is a corporate icon. He's held senior positions and CEO positions in very strategic organizations, not only in Ghana, but also across the world. He has influenced the spans beyond Ghana. He's been CEO of VRA, he's been CEO of Tullow Oil, he's working at Ashanti Gold, and he's been the director of several institutions, including chairman of Multimedia, the most powerful media organization in the country, possibly in Africa. He's CEO of UBA Ghana, chairman of UBA Ghana. He's been a chairman of Stanbic. So this is a man of many parts. He's been able to navigate several industries, and it is our honor and pleasure to have him on the time with CEO to share his lessons. So please, this is not the man you want to miss. This is the man you want everybody. You invite your friends to come and listen to. We are all at his feet at this moment. We'll just bring Mr. Kweku Awotwi onto the podium, a very humble man, despite all his positions. If you get close to him, you'll see a man who's down to earth, very simple and cordial, respectful to everybody. Mr. Chairman, you are welcome to the leadership platform. It is our honor to have you.
Thank you very much, Samuel. And I'm really also pleased and honored to be invited by you and your team, Joy and Sarah, to share this platform with you. You know, from time to time, I've always been asking you how it's going, and I've been impressed with what you are doing because, as we both know and agree, it's a very important service you provide to all manner of people, young and old alike, providing stories, leadership, templates, inspiration for all of us, and we need it. So I'm pleased that I'm now part of that journey with you. So thank you as well for having me on today. Should I get right to it and talk about
Thank
myself
you so much,
a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much. I think we are honored to have you. So, as we said, this is going to be more discussional, but feel free to tell us what you want. We want to start from the beginning. We want to start. We know that when we see people at such high positions, assumptions is that these people have not had any problem. They don't even have any problem. I mean, these guys are dada bars who just have gone through life, silver spoon or golden spoon in their mouths, and they've just been lucky, you know.
Right.
So tell us, how lucky have you been
Well, I
throughout your
think
life from the beginning?
it's a wonderful thing you start with, because I think we are all here by God's grace and God's favor, and there's so much that happens to us that is not really in our control. We thank Providence and God for the good fortune if we have it, and even in adversity sometimes we learn a lot. I used to have this conversation with friends. I'm sure you've had it, or some of us have had it, where we say, how much do our parents have to do with our lives as we speak? And you would get various answers from nothing at all from some to 80% from others. I happen to be in the 80% camp, where I think that so much of our lives are, if you like, shaped by those before us, especially our parents, because in the beginning we have very little input into the choices that we make. So we are, if you like, the beneficiaries of 20% of our lives, because the other 80% is being or has been determined by friends and family and our environment. Those who go above that, I mean, well done. But I really do think that so much is in other people's control, in Providence control, and we have to be grateful for that as well. But having started with that, my 20% starts from Cape Coast. That's where both sides of my family are from. Cape Coast, Elmina, both my mother and father's side. We actually migrated from Elmina to Cape Coast. I was born in Accra. I have a slightly different background than many. At 6, I went to boarding school in England, a very strict boarding school, if I may say so. I came back at 11 to go to Infantsmim, where I did my O and A levels. And then I think after that, I spent a year or so thinking about what to do, because I really didn't want to stay in Ghana anymore. And I had the good fortune to be admitted to Yale University, where I got my bachelor's. I'll talk about that in a minute. In engineering, I did electrical engineering. I actually did a double major. One of the reasons I went to America was I was very attracted to what they call the liberal arts education, where you could experiment. I think those of us who are old enough, after you did physics, chemistry, math, either you're going to be an engineer or a doctor or something in between. There was very little sort of option for you to do other things. And I wanted to do other things. So I had the good fortune. I did electrical engineering, but I also did a major called economics and political science, which is really a shorthand for international relations. We studied the global political and economic system. I worked as an engineer for 4 years. My first job out of school, I was designing microprocessors for
Mr. Chairman, before you look at the work you did, just a little bit on the family side.
Right.
I mean, how many were you in the family? Were you the only child, only boy, only person, one person? How was when you were growing up with your siblings? How many were you, and what was the situation environment in Cape Coast and being Accra as you were growing up?
So that's a great question. I'm actually an only child of my parents. My father had married before my mother, but then they divorced sadly soon after I was born. So I lived with my mother for the first few years, and I was her only child until she remarried, but I had left the country by that point. So in some respects, I grew up as an only child. In others, my father did have 2 older children from his previous marriage, but I didn't live with my father until much later on. So the first opportunity I had to live with my father was he went on a posting, and me being his only boy, and at a certain age, the other children were a bit older in secondary school already. he was almost forced to take me with him. So I had the, if you like, the good fortune, if you will, to join him on his posting in the UK. And but he was working, so he sent me to boarding school, a school that one of our cousins had also attended, so he was somewhat familiar. So that was really my background, and I think it was only later on when I returned to Ghana, in the 70s, when I was back in secondary school, that I got to learn, got to know my other siblings better. My mother had remarried, so I got to know her children also. I think all in all, my father ended up having 8 children. I was one of 8, but 5 after I was born. And my mother had 6 children, and I was the oldest of the 6 after she also remarried. So that's my family situation. Having said that, I mean, maybe some of you will recognize this. Both sides of my family are very tight, in the sense of, I knew all my aunties and uncles on both sides of my family. I think my father and even my mother, we family is very important. I think as we grow older, we all appreciate that. So I never felt like an only child. I mean, my sisters were very supportive of me. I'm quite close to both sides of my family, even though we may share different parents in some cases. So I was fortunate in that sense that at the time my father went on posting, I was his only boy.
Was he an ambassador?
He was a civil servant. He was the principal secretary at the Ministry of Defense, and he in those days the principal secretaries would go from one posting to another. I think after defense he went into communications, but he was in defense for a number of years. So when he went on posting, he actually went to the Royal Defense College of the United Kingdom, and he was there for a year. So
How did this background shape who you became and you have become?
Right. So it's in terms of my education. So what I would say is boarding school is we take it for granted in this part of the world, but in many parts of the world, people don't go to boarding school, especially at the time they're 6. It was sort of had a religious background to it. Extremely strict, extremely strict. And corporal punishment was still in fashion in those days. Let's just say it toughened me a great deal. They were very kind and warm-hearted from a certain point of view. I never felt like a stranger, even though I think we were probably 5 Black/African children in a school of about 250, mostly white children. But they were very strict. Lunch hour was at 8:30. If you're not in bed at 8:30, you got caned. It was as simple as that. And so it teaches you discipline to a great degree. And I think as we get on to your question, I learned a lot of discipline from that school. You learn to be extremely disciplined, just because it's like a training. It's I would attribute a lot of that discipline to that early experience. So I actually found in Fanspim, even though there was a lot of bullying, and I think they were a bit surprised that a young boy from England, I was extremely tough and resilient because I'd learned it. I've been caned enough times.
I'm sure these days people talk about, hey, you can't cane a child. So I don't know whether, since you have had that experience, what is your perspective in terms of whether it is right or wrong?
It's interesting. I think, like so many things, it's how it's done. If it's done out of anger and emotion and there's chaos, it loses its meaning. But if I'm not suggesting that we should be caning our children, but in a typical environment like that, you are caned for something very specific. You did this. This is the consequence, and
Yes.
you after a you get the connection. You get the connection doing that. You shouldn't be doing this. And
Yeah.
it had as I said, a fairly religious. Many of our schools in Ghana have it too, but that also had a very religious sort of training to it. We went to church on Sundays. We went to, service every day. You learn values and morals and principles, and it's not a bad thing. I think most schools do that as well. But I would say the difference, what stood out beyond the academics, which it was a good school, there was a lot of discipline, and I learned a lot because of that. Yeah, I would say that was my grounding. Infantsbim was a great school too. Those of you who went to Infantsbim, I don't think it's quite the same school that it is these days. I say that. I mean, in many of our schools, I don't think Infantsbim is any different. We have the same facilities, largely same classrooms, same dormitories, but 3 times the number of students. And so, how do you cope? How does the school cope? But in back in the day, 50 years ago, it was a lot more manageable, and the quality of teaching was really very good. And so, getting to the university in the U.S. after doing your A levels, physics, chemistry, math, was not. We were well prepared. We were well prepared. Yeah, we were well prepared.
So, with that background, what kind of student were you at Infantsbim? Did you enjoy yourself, or you were just studious, just bookish? I mean, from all the discipline from UK and
I was definitely a bookworm. I was definitely a bookworm, but I think part of it was, I was also quite young, and when you come to Form 1 back in the day, you had a range of ages. You had the range from 11 to, in some cases, 15, and that's when boys grow. And there were a lot of boys that were bigger and stronger than me. So even though I thought I was quite athletic, age won out. So very quickly I found that I couldn't compete with the bigger boys. I could just stick with my books, and I think I just stuck with my books for most of the 5 years that I was definitely a bookworm, which I wouldn't necessarily encourage. And in fact, if there's a learning that I have picked up along the way, it's good to have an all-around, sort of training. One of the things that happens actually in the United States is that they look for that. They actually look to see, are you a rounded individual? Are you, or you are just, having good grades is not enough. And they look for, what else do you do? Luckily for me, I one of the things I used to do when I was in secondary school is that I did a lot of music. I played the piano. I was in a gospel group. So we did a few things that at least made me not just a bookworm. And, so that helped me a little bit. But it is important to be rounded. Sports is very important. Other cultural activities, hobbies. It shouldn't be all about books, but it shouldn't be all about books. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Then that took you to the US. You went to Yale. This is not, it's not not many and people at that time will be able to go to Yale.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Really, I must confess, it was I was very fortunate, but one of my schoolmates got into Yale, and I thought, wow, if he can get into Yale, maybe I can get into too. The fact of the matter really is that from just a technical rigor point of view, we are actually quite well prepared, especially in the sciences, And it's not by accident that a lot of foreign students who come to America, full stop, focus on the sciences, because it's well laid out. You don't need to. Language is less of an issue. You don't need to be versatile in American culture to do well.
Yeah.
But so we're well prepared in that respect. So I think getting in was also not that hard. I think one of the things that I mentioned just a few minutes ago was that there's quite a difference between the US system and the Ghana system. The Ghana/UK system, it's all about your grades. Did you get the grades or did you not?
Yeah.
And I remember when I was trying to fill my US application the first time, things like personal essay and recommendation. I mean, these were foreign, who personal essay and write about what,
Yeah.
It was culturally very different. But
Yeah.
I think at the end of it, I have to say education is not just about grades. It's so much more. And being part of that system force you to think about, life. And then we can talk about that some more, but basically there's an introspection that goes on as well as an outward looking perspective that people are looking for. What do you think? How do you think? What's important? Whereas when it's all about grades, it doesn't even come into the picture. When people are going to Legon these days, I hear there's a cutoff. You're either 19 and that's it. And I think that does us a disservice now. Maybe this is the best we can do, but the American system does require you to be more than grades. And I think that's also good. I think highly because of that.
I think that's an important point you make, because sometimes there's thinking that we're not able to deal with our problems partly because of our educational system, which is just focused on grade. People are just even buying the grades, asking people to write essays for them, buying questions. And so we have a lot of people who have come and they're holding positions, and the issue of problem solving, critical thinking, it's not, we haven't been able to develop that enough in our educational system to help us. And so
I couldn't agree with you more, Sam. I really couldn't. And I think for that reason, I've become a real big fan of the American, what they call the liberal arts education. So let me just expand on what you said. So at schools like Yale, I don't think Yale is unusual. Many American schools require it. No matter what degree you take, you have what they call distributional requirements. So you have to take a year of social science, whether you're an engineer, art, it doesn't matter. You have to take something in the social sciences, economics, political science, something like that. You have to take a year of something in the humanities. It could be philosophy, literature, whatever. You have to take a year in language, and then you have to take a year in English. Now, I was surprised by that, because you think, well, these people are English people, but every student is required to take 1 year of English in the university, and they make you write, they make you read, a text every week, and they require you to write a paper every week. I mean, it's quite intense, and it doesn't matter whatever you are doing. You can be doing finance, you can be doing engineering, and that's where that critical thinking gets really tested, developed. Your ability to write. I learned how to write well in the university, because you're forced to write. You're forced to write. You're forced to think. You're forced to make the connections with different aspects of society and the world around you. And that's something that I wish we could do more of in Ghana as well.
Great. Good. So you went through that. You went to Stanford. You did an MBA again from Yale to Stanford, and then tell us a bit more. And then you started working. You're going to tell us a bit more. So
it's ironic in a way. My desire to go to Stanford in California, Stanford is in the middle of Silicon Valley. A lot of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I thought, as an electrical engineer, it would be perfect for me. And I was fortunate enough to get in. I mean, for those of you who know anything about Stanford, it probably still is the most difficult school to get into in the
Yes.
MBA program. Yeah. But once again, just going back to a theme, and I do think it's worth sharing, Stanford was not just looking for grades. They were looking for interesting people with interesting perspective, different ideas. You could say it helped that, I was a foreign international student to begin with, but they had a lot of international students applying. What they were looking for is, what's your vision? What do you think about society? How do you think about what you've done in your life? And, the MBA program is not, you can be an art student and do your MBA. You can be an engineer and do your MBA. You can be a lawyer and do your MBA. We had a number of doctors who were doing their MBA. I mean, so it's all walks of life who wish to, enhance their education. And in each case, they're looking for why. Why do you want to do this? I mean, they weren't actually that interested in your grades. They were, why do you want to do this MBA? What are you going to do with it? And, I talked about my vision for how I could contribute to my own society in Ghana. We'll touch on those things. I talked about things I did when I got to Ghana eventually, because I had that idea. I was very interested in solar energy and things of that sort. So, as it so happened, by the time I got to Stanford and got through that, I realized that I didn't want to continue to design computer chips and do fancy high quality graphics. I probably would be very wealthy by now if you think of all the companies doing very well. But I was much more interested in having a much more sort of immediate connection with my own country and my own economy. And what we find out, again, this is not profound, is what African countries and economies are good at, let's call it that. We are commodity traders. We produce cocoa and we produce gold and oil in some cases. And we're not having a conversation about value add, which is the appropriate conversation to have. But at least we know how to produce commodities. That we know how to do. And so for some odd, reason, I became very interested in the commodities of energy. In particular, energy is a commodity, oil and gas, because without energy and without electricity, our economies don't develop.
Yeah.
And I was very, if you like, animated by what Kwame Nkrumah did when he became, president, the Volta River Project. For many, many years, and maybe even today, Ghana was ahead of much of Africa because we had electrified substantial parts of our country. And even today, those of you may know, electricity access in Ghana is the highest, second to South Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And so that idea of energy as a prime mover in our economy was really interesting to me. And so I became much more interested in that. And I wanted to work for a company that was involved in that. So by the time I graduated, I think I actually had two offers, one from an oil and gas company, and then the other one from an aluminum company, which happened to be Kaiser Aluminium or Aluminum. And now the oil and gas company, I probably would have done very well. But what was interesting to me about Kaiser was it was the very same company that owned 90% of the Baku smelter in Ghana.
Yes.
And it did many other things. It had mines in Jamaica, Australia, factories all over the world. But having that presence in Ghana excited me because I hope that one day it would become part of my portfolio as well.
Yeah.
And sure enough, So I was at Kaiser for a number of years. I was there for 8 years in the corporate business planning section. And, Kaiser was a big company. It's a $2 billion
Mm-hmm.
company. 30 years ago, it was in what they call the US Fortune 50. Um, we were a very small corporate office, and we were basically running the company from an analysis point of view, the planning, the analysis, the business
Mm-hmm.
development. And it was really, once again, in terms of foundation, really helped me build my business and corporate
Mm.
tools, planning, strategic planning. I read more balance sheets than I cared to remember. For someone who didn't like
For a
accounting,
scientist.
I became a very good accountant. I read a lot of legal documents because business is all about contracts.
Yeah.
And it was also very rigorous. I mean, you're listed in the New York Stock Exchange. You're one of the top 50 companies in the US. It's serious business.
Yeah.
I got to interact, even though I was a young man, with the leaders of the company, and that really was a wonderful corporate training for me. I mean, it has really, I think, stood me in good stead as a foundation to my business career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So from there, I moved to Ashanti Goldfields, which, from a certain point of view, maybe not a big move. I went
Mm-hmm.
from aluminium to gold, but one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons was that Kaiser was looking to find some power solutions in Ghana at the time for its Valco smelter, and Ashanti was looking to do the same. So I started to interact with the Ashanti Goldfields management team. They got to know me a little bit, and they had an opening, and they called me one day and said, "We have this opening. Would you help us, build our power project?" But the position is head of business development.
Mm.
So that was in '98. I had the good fortune to work with Sam Jonah. Uh,
Okay.
he was my direct boss. Um, and even though it's a big company, I mean, Ashanti, it's not Anglo Gold Ashanti, it's Ashanti
Mm-hmm.
Goldfield before
Yes.
the merger. Um, a very interesting company to work for. Sam Jonah was truly a visionary leader in that respect. Those of you who may or may not know, AGC at the time was the first African operated and managed company to list on the London and New York stock exchanges. No,
Yes.
I mean, there are a lot of
I was then at the lawyer for the stock exchange who reviewed the prospectus. And
right.
later on, when I did my MBA, it was my case study at Exeter University looking at cross listings, Ashanti as a case.
So
It was very,
we were definitely a front runner. There were
yeah.
other investment holding companies, but this was an African operated and managed company. And sure enough, the management was mostly African. And again, for those of you who know anything about mining, that was new.
Mm.
Mining had typically been run by foreign interests. That's the history of Africa. And it was really Ashanti leading the way. Ghana led the way from a certain point of view, having its own people run the show. And Sam Jonah himself obviously was a child of mining, having grown up in Obuasi, started mining when he was 17 or 18. But we were really ambitious, excited to do a lot on the continent. While I was at Ashanti, we built at least two mines, one in Tanzania, one in Guinea. We had operations in many other African countries. We had exploration offices in about 26 African countries. And as the head of business development, I got to see them all.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
was a very, it was a wonderful way to see the continent, first of all,
Yeah.
get to see how other countries did their business, because mining, goes straight to the top, even here. But Ashanti was also very aggressive. I mean, we spent a lot of time both in London, especially because our office was in London, and also in New York to a lesser extent. So now you are dealing with, investors from all over the world. You're dealing with banks sitting in the city of London, lawyers sitting in the city of London. Again, a very sophisticated group of stakeholders. You better be on your game.
Yeah.
So I would say Kaiser gave me great fundamentals in terms of skills. Ashanti allowed me the opportunity to actually work on the continent, get to see how we did things on the continent. So those are sort of two different aspects of business and leadership, isn't it? One is the skills, and the other is experience. And you may have all the skills in the world, but without experience,
Yeah.
it gets really so far. So I think
Yeah.
Ashanti was a wonderful place. I learned a lot. It wasn't all smooth sailing. Again, we had a derivatives crisis. We almost went bankrupt.
Absolutely.
But we came through it. And again, as part of the executive team, you learn a lot coming through adversity. How do you deal with the banks? I quite remember one day when the crisis ballooned, if you like. We had to meet all our banks in a town hall in the downtown city of London, and it was brutal. I mean, they wanted your blood, and
Yes.
coming from Africa, it has its own particular. Oh my God,
Exactly.
expectations were low, but we came through it, and it was also
Yeah.
very powerful learning for a corporate person of any kind,
Yeah.
myself included.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I mean that, and then you from there you went to where? VRA or
So what
Tullow
happened
and
after that was really when Anglo merged with Ashanti, they offered me a job in Johannesburg, but I wasn't keen. I really didn't. I didn't want to go to South Africa to work for Anglo Gold.
yeah.
The division of Ashanti was what took me there in the first place.
Yeah.
I didn't feel the same about the vision of Anglo Gold. I mean, they, of course, big mining company, but it was just a bit different. So I took my severance and I moved back to the US.
Okay.
And around that time, I started a number of entrepreneurial ventures. I started a mining company actually with two South Africans. And I started, I ran an oil and gas company with some investors in the US.
Okay.
And I started one of the power projects that are currently running in Ghana as we speak with a couple of my colleagues, Sun Power Generation. So that was my entrepreneurial phase where I said I have to do something on my own one day, because it's on the one hand you learn a lot working
Yeah.
for big companies and other people. Sometimes the test is when you work for yourself, and as probably somewhere you probably work harder working for yourself than other people.
You do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that phrase: you eat what you kill. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
if you don't bring back the bacon, you don't eat. So
That's all.
and you're on. So that was I enjoyed the phase. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of travel at the time, and it takes time. These things, when you're trying to develop something, they never happen as quickly as you think they will.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
we thought took 2 years took us 5.
Mm-hmm.
There were challenging times. Some of it bore fruit, as we can talk about, but it was a good experience for me. Now I went from corporate executive to entrepreneur, working for myself, my partners, a small group of people. Very very different, uh,
Yeah.
very different, but also very powerful learning working
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And then what happened really, so somewhere along the line around year 5 of my phase, um, I got a call to come and run the VRA, the Volta River Authority. And some of that wasn't really surprising if you think about what I've just described, because
Yeah.
between Kaiser, owning Valco, Ashanti Goldfields.
Mm-hmm.
The mines are big consumers of electricity. Kaiser would
Yeah.
spend $50 million every year to VRA. Ashanti was 30 million. And so we, as the corporate officers,
Mm.
we were the VRA's single largest consumers of electricity for 15 years. I was effectively.
Yeah.
In that period, you get to know your suppliers extremely well.
Yeah.
If you're spending that kind of money. So the VRA knew me well. I mean, I was an opponent of theirs. I was an antagonist, if you like. But we knew the business, and they knew we knew the business. And so I think when President Mills, what had actually happened was President Kufuor had asked me to run VRA temporarily in 2003 when there was an industrial action and the workers didn't want to work for Dr. Reku Brobe. So we did that for a number of months. But at the time, I wasn't really keen to work long term for them. I still felt like I was a young man. I think that record went down well. And when President Mills came to power, they reached out to me to run the VRA. So again, we came in with knowledge. We came in with
Yeah.
knowledge of that industry, and that often happens. You may be in one industry, but because of that, you touch other industries.
Yeah.
So your ability to be expert or fluent in those industries also positions you,
Yeah.
from a career point of view, for those of you who think about these things. So you may be
Yeah.
a banker, but you are banking to the fast-moving consumer goods industry, and you become very good at that, or a lawyer. And so, being good at these particular areas also positions you very well. And that
Yeah.
happens to be my situation with, the electricity requirement of those two big mining companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And it seems that you've actually, you're a quick learner. You've put all that together. From there, you went to Tullow, and then also back into banking, just chairing banks and so on and so forth. So it seems that what you're saying, that when you work in one sector, it enables you to know the other sectors, and if you apply yourself well, you'll be able to transfer your skills. That's what I'm getting. Is that right?
I think that's right. I mean, the energy spectrum, starts from solar all the way to oil and gas. But just to pick up on your point, I'll make two. When I was at Kaiser, we used to buy electricity from all different sources of power. We, in the UK, we bought nuclear power. In the US, we bought hydropower. In Ghana, we bought hydro. So, and in Australia, we bought coal-fired power. You learn all these different opportunities, and you become quite savvy because you need to know the technical aspects, the financial aspects, etc. So in that way, this is exactly the point you're making as well. Some of it too is often, I would say as a young person, I'm sure you feel the same, Samuel. It all depends on what you want. I wanted to. So let me maybe perhaps give some context. I mean, in many of these situations, especially when you travel abroad, you are one of very few. So in Kaiser, I was probably the only Black officer at that level. You can't afford to do you've got to hold up. You can't
Yeah.
afford to
You have
lose
to
face.
prove yourself 10 times.
Exactly. So it also forces you to really be on your toes, be up on things. You just can't afford it because
Yeah.
the spotlight is on you, and that has its own benefit. So you're being able to keep up with the rest of the competition, if you like, also positions you very well. I mean, when the government came calling, it was clear I was an energy expert already,
Yeah.
and that's what helps you there. But there's sometimes that, it's also because you proved yourself in one space, they think you can help in another. I got involved in banking. They were looking for a board member at Stanbic. And my initial response was, but I don't know anything about banking. And they said, oh, it doesn't matter. You're a private sector person. And as you know, I went through the ranks of banking board, and I chaired audit, and I chaired credit and risk management, and they made me the chairman, and it happened again. But it's also about the skills you pick up.
Yeah.
So here I am as an engineer, and I can read a balance sheet as well as the next person. I can read a good contract as well. And it comes from, the fundamentals you pick up along the way.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we'll take a short break here, and then we'll come back and pick some of the leadership lessons that you have picked along the way, the principles that have guided you, the values that have guided you so far. And then at that point, I think I'll bring my able ladies to join me to do some of those discussions. I'll bring Sarah and Joy. So let's take a quick short break and then come back with our chairman.
Is your team ready to soar to new heights? At CTL Africa Leadership, we specialize in transforming potential into performance. Whether it's mastering winning with people, enhancing emotional intelligence, decoding human behavior, or strengthening team leadership, we've got you covered. Dive into personal leadership and elevate your corporate governance standards. Our tailor-made programs are designed to unlock your team's full potential. Don't settle for ordinary. Be extraordinary. Book a discovery call with CTL Africa today, and let's design a development program that transforms your team. Visit our website www.ctlafricaleadership.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Joy. And for our viewers, if you have comments and questions, continue to share them. And at the right time, we'll bring you in. There's so much from Mr. Awotwi's experience. 1.5 hours is not enough to dig into all of them. And in all this journey, Mr. Awotwi, you've had several recognitions and awards. You want to let us in briefly into some of the awards that have come your way? We know that you were not working for those awards, but they came anyway. And it's sometimes inspiration to some of us who are thinking that we're working hard and nothing is coming. So if you want to just share a few of those ones with us.
Okay. Well, look, I think there are a couple that I'm very proud of. One is I got a Lifetime Achievement Award on energy from the energy, I don't even know what they call themselves, but the people who get those Lifetime Awards include people like Mr. Kalichi, one of our former CEOs at VRA, and President Rawlings got one as well posthumously because of what he did. I don't know whether many of you are familiar, but he was really instrumental in moving the network up to the north in the late 80s and 90s. So I was in very good company, and I was really honored to be in that company. I also got a Lifetime Africa Award on energy from what they call the Africa Energy Forum. And that was only the second time they were giving that award, and I was actually pleasantly surprised to get it. But, and again, it's not just a Ghana award, but, in a sense, it perhaps recognized my range of experience between, oil and gas, electricity, working for the government, working on my own. I mentioned this independent power project that myself and my founders developed that is actually providing about 380 megawatts of power to the Ghana grid as we speak. So we've done a lot in the sector. Some of you may or may not know, when I was at VRA, I built Ghana's first solar farm, even before we had the renewable regulations. So I'm pleased for those kind of lifetime award recognitions. I've had others, including the Corporate Ghana Hall of Fame, but I think lifetime really sort of speaks to a certain, longevity of career, which is I'm very pleased and honored to have received.
Yeah. Congratulations, it's well deserved. And I'm going to bring Sarah. And my last question before Sarah comes in, and I will bring Joy at the same time because I know that they have perspectives that they want to find. I just want to ask to share with us some of your personal principles that you've lived by that has enabled you. Yeah, some people go to UK, they go to US, they go to all those things, they get opportunity in good organizations, and yet still they don't make the impact you have made or the success you have achieved. There must be certainly something personal to you that enable you to achieve. It's not just the schools and the environment, but you within. You want to share a few of some of your principles that you've lived by with us?
Sure. So I talked about discipline, and I think, for all of us, without discipline, it's hard to achieve anything.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to unlearn bad habits. So, the key to discipline, and this is where, I'm not sure I had anything to do with it. When you learn it at an early age and you become trained to, wake up at a certain time and hit your books at a certain time, and discipline becomes very important. And as I think I would say, as we get older, it's harder because now we have so many other things that impinge on our lives. We have family life, we have our children, we have our parents, we have our relatives, we have God knows what else going on, friends. So being disciplined and focused is a habit that is, you need to learn early, and you need to continue to strengthen it like a muscle, but it really helps. I mean, so discipline and focus, if it translates into hard work. And you do have to work hard. I don't know anybody, I mean, this is something that easily, I don't know how you get anywhere without hard work. You've got to work. You've got to put in the time. You've got to put in the effort. And sometimes you have the incentive because you've got to keep up with everybody else, or you've got to prove yourself, but you still got to work hard. So those are three things that easily come to mind, discipline, focus, hard work. But I would say one thing that I feel has helped me in my corporate career is a sense of integrity. I'll be honest, one of my big surprises when I first started my corporate career, not as an engineer, because we're fixing sums and running things, and we don't have to present ourselves to too many people. When I started my corporate career, what impressed me most was that my managers had a lot of integrity. And, I mean, the U.S. is not, when certainly in the corporate environment, religion is not something you don't say it doesn't, it's not overt in a certain way. So I think sometimes the irony is that here in Ghana we say we are very religious people and Benjamin and all kinds of stuff, but then we tell lies at work. In the US, what surprised me, and I don't know why it surprised me, is my managers, what they said here is what they said over there. They had integrity, and it was consistent. And it really made a mark on me that if I was to go to the top or wherever it is I wanted to go, that was a very important value for me. Integrity is not just about telling the truth, which is very important, but it's telling the truth consistently. Sometimes that gets you into trouble, and I can tell you that certainly some of my bosses have not always been happy with me because I've told them the truth and they've not liked it. But I think that people also respect you over time, because they know that you're not going to BS them, you're not going to tell them some lie. I mean, I have found it very interesting that President Mills asked me to be the CEO of VRA, and President Anado asked me to be the chairman of VRA. It wasn't because I was trying to tell one person one thing and a certain person another thing. So I would say to those of us on this call, integrity is so important if you want to do well, and we need it as a people. I mean, never mind, you need it for yourself. We need it as a people to tell the truth. And I think I was extremely surprised when I got to Ghana and I found out that we actually tell a lot of lies at work. I couldn't believe that I could be at work and someone would just tell a lie. It seemed so strange to me. Now, I don't mean to. I mean, we are all here, as we say. When you're at home and you tell a little white lie here and there, that's one thing. But I've always felt, and you may feel the same, when you have a constituency who depend on you, whether that constituency is 5 people or 500 people, you cannot afford to lead them astray, to tell them what is not true, let them down. The public trust is just too much, in my view. But people do it all the time. People are doing it as we speak today. You have people, the President Trump of the world. I mean, it's not like everybody believes that's the way to go. Actually, a lot of people don't. But I do think that, if we are to do well as a society, as a people, we need people of integrity to lead us. It's not by accident that Nelson Mandela took South Africa from apartheid. Integrity. It's not by accident that South Africa is coming down, because subsequent leaders have not been people of integrity. I don't need to name names. And we can apply it even to Ghana here if you like. But integrity is something that I feel, for me, is absolutely important, that you say what you mean what you say, and you tell the truth. And you do it all the time. And sometimes you won't like the results, but you tell the truth anyway. Yeah.
Thank you so very much. And that is really, really, really important. Sarah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mr. Awotwi. I'm just curious. You have talked so much about your upbringing. You've talked so much about your corporate life. There's been so many transitions that you've gone through. And personally, I just want to see, how were you able to transition from each industry area to what are the challenges that you saw, and how did you overcome those challenges?
In terms of the different industries?
Yes, the different industries.
That's right. I think, it's a good question. I think boarding school prepares us to learn to work and be with people who are different from us. And we can talk about even boarding school here in Ghana. And I think there's even literature to suggest that, one of the reasons Ghana has been stable, we don't have religious strife, we don't have the same kind of ethnic strife in many other African countries. My secondary school mates were Gans and, people from the north, and Ashantis, people we didn't know. You get to know the Muslims, and they're your friends, and they eat from the same bowl as you, and you learn to adapt. And I learned to start adapting at a very young age, at the age of 6. So what I would say, I think adaptability and being able to, adapt in different environments becomes very important for a successful career. Because, we talk about things like hard work and ambition and all of that. At the end of the day, you're dealing with people. So those interpersonal characteristics become very important. How do you deal with people? There was a line of thinking, I'm sure many of us have had it, that, oh, it's good to be quiet and don't make any trouble, don't make any noise, just whatever, do your good grades, whatever it is. Actually, no. In the corporate world, it doesn't pay to be quiet. It doesn't pay to sit in your corner. You will not do well. You need to be out there. You need to show what you can do. You need to coordinate with your colleagues. You need to be adaptable. And I would say that's probably certainly one of the reasons why I got hired at some. I mean, the big companies are big international companies, but I think the folks at Kaiser were very curious that I got on so well with them. Who is this guy anyway, kind of thing. But adaptability and learning to be comfortable. But I do think boarding school is very helpful in that regard.
Thank you. And I really love the fact that, the thread that I'm picking up is you're so intentional about whatever you do. You set up a vision and you go for it. How did you come about this quality of being so intentional?
It's true. I am actually. I mean, in a way that sometimes makes me pause. I don't know where that necessarily comes from. I think, again, some of it is environment. I mentioned my father who worked for the government of Ghana, and to something we may touch on. So he came in, newly independent Ghana, and he, working as a civil servant for the country. Service was a badge of honor. Now, well, how does that relate to intentionality? I think what that translated for me was a certain sense that there are things we must do. However that came about. And in my particular case, I got very excited about energy and all of that. But it was a service to be done. I mean, it wasn't so much that, I've never felt the need to make money. I felt the need to do something of value. And I have to say that probably comes from my parents. That sense of what is it that I can do that has value and that serves my community in the best possible way. Yeah.
Right, beautiful. Now I'm going to be curious again. You've talked about all that. What about your personal life? Are you married? Do you have children? You haven't touched upon that at all.
I was waiting for that. So I'm on my second marriage. I was married maybe about 30 years ago, and we have a couple of children from that first marriage. Luckily, I'm on good terms with my first wife. I'll tell a funny story. She's from Nigeria. We met in California. And when I told my parents that I was marrying a Nigerian, they were horrified. And I said, but we're all Africans, we should be.
Yeah, indeed.
But as things go, sometimes the cultural issues can become a problem along the way. I mean, I'd be too simplistic to say that was the only reason. But we have two lovely children. I have two lovely children from that marriage. Both of them have graduated from university. And my current wife and I don't have children, but we've been married for about 15 years. So,
right.
Yeah.
I think I'll stop here because I can see some questions that are coming up, and we also have Joy, who will be representing the the younger generation. Over to you, Joy.
Okay. I mean, there's just so much in this conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Awotwi, for sharing. One of the things that I had, throughout is process. I think you're a process person to ensure that, because it took time, like you said, it takes time to build trust. It took time to move to, from being an engineer to business to, even to read balance sheets and also to read legal documents. So I see a lot of process there, which encourages me though, that, everything takes time if you want to be a successful leader. I do have a question about from working with all these organizations, from public sector to multinationals in the US and Ghana, what would you say is probably something you have come to a conclusion when it comes to leadership, when it comes to doing business in Ghana, young people? Is there anything that has carried through as a theme that you've been convinced about or you've changed your mind about? So I'll be curious to know that.
Right. I think it's a big question you raised there, Joy. But I certainly do agree with you about process, and it helps being an engineer to sort of think about process, because we think about that all the time. But I do remember, I mean, just to maybe stay with that thought for a minute, one of my very first corporate planning exercises at Kaiser, and I'm a young, analyst with my senior managers. And the question was, what are we trying to do? And one of my managers said, well, we want this very good product, but you will not get that very good product without a good process. It's not possible. So just to stay with that thought, I think one of the things that I would say, I don't know how well this responds to your question, is there's a lot of context in what we do, which we need to be more aware of as managers. I mean, even as a small business, let's see whether it makes sense what I'm about to say. A lot of my colleagues in the US, in either undergraduate or graduate school, have been extremely successful. And I mean, extremely in terms of they made a lot of money and all of that. It is so hard to make money in this country. And why is that as a small business? Well, there's some very simple reasons. The interest rates are too high. The exchange rate is rapidly depreciating. I can keep going with that list. So why is that important? I think as a manager, as a person going up the corporate ladder, one would be remiss if all they do is think about their lane. One has to be much more thoughtful about the economic environment and the political environment we live in. And we all have a role to play. I mean, we can sort of pretend, well, that has nothing to do with me. The politicians have nothing to do with me. The Bank of Ghana has nothing to do with me. But actually they do. They're affecting your performance, and maybe you're not seeing it. It speaks to a much larger conversation about how do we engage as a society to be meaningful in our work. It's one thing. I think what I'm trying to say is, it's all well and good to say, well, I'm a very good accountant, or I'm a very good lawyer, but doing what? What are you doing? I mean, at some point you've got to answer that question. And I do think that certainly in our part of the world, our challenges are substantially different from the OECD and the West. And I think we as corporate people, as leaders, as aspiring leaders, the more we are aware of that, I think the more effective we are, because these things call for holistic solutions. I hope that addressed your question to some extent.
It does. Yeah. And then also, I mean, in about 7 years' time, I mean, this continent would be housing literally 50% of the world's youth population. And we're looking at our workforce. I mean, you have been a corporate leader, and managing boards. What would you say to any leader today to position their companies? Because, I mean, we have to start from our own corners in a way to effectively harness youth talent. I mean, the skill, not to say, let's just make it all fun and happy hour all the time, but effective leadership from young leaders.
There's so many parts to that, but in a way you're doing some of it. I think training is so important. And, it starts from the schools. And so, what's the quality of education that's coming out of our universities? But even after the schools, I think you would all agree with me, there's so much learning after school that also has to happen. And so training is so important, and it's lifelong education, lifelong training is really important for us all, for us to do, obviously for a young person I would stay with that in a sense, because, and training is not just one thing. It's not training to be an accountant or training to be a lawyer. It's training about the general society, or learning skills, interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, as well as reading a balance sheet. I mean, these are all equally important from a certain point of view. And I really would say training is so important. But I think the challenge we have a lot perhaps, is the quality of our graduates from our institutions. It's not as high as it should be, let's put it that way. So that makes it even more important to do the kind of training afterwards. It's not the end of the world, but it does mean that there's an even greater sort of burden on training, the kind of after school training, let's call it that, on the job training. Many companies today, when they think about skills development, qualifications are just a piece of that training. On the job training is most of it, but also, courses like this are part of it. So I'd say training is such a big piece of that, to make us be competent professionals.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joy and Sarah, for those perspectives that you've brought. There are a few questions coming in. I'm interested, Mr. Chairman, to talk also about your leadership style. You've led several organizations, and so and you've been successful at it. What has been your leadership style? How have you? What are the things that have worked for you as a leader?
Right. So I think we're all familiar with the days of command and control. You bark the orders and everybody falls in line. That doesn't work anymore. And I think, sadly, we still in some areas think it works, and maybe it works to an extent. But I learned early on that doesn't work. You really need to be inclusive. You really need to be open. And perhaps it requires a certain vulnerability, also it's a mix of things. You shouldn't be afraid to be wrong. And sometimes in our part of the world, we think just because I'm the boss, I must know everything. It's actually the other way around. I've heard so many interviews of some very successful people. And what do they say? The secret of my success, I'm surrounded by very smart people. Yeah. And so if you're not open to that, if you're not encouraging of that, you have only one head. You bring everybody in. And I think that is really important too. But you also have to encourage that, because in our part of the world as well, as we all know, if your boss says something, for you to say something else is a no-no. And so you've got to find ways to encourage that. I have to say, I found it very interesting. Sometimes I would go into meetings at some of my companies. I won't mention their names. And the best ideas came from the most junior people. But normally they wouldn't even be asked by their CEO, what do they think? But I would go around the room and ask everybody their opinion. So it wasn't like I was taking them out of line. We don't do that enough. I think at the board level, as someone will know, everybody has to have a say. Then the challenge, it becomes more, how do you bring that to conclusion? Because sometimes that can get out of hand. But you want that. You want that diversity of opinion, diversity of thinking, and it's intergenerational. The young people will have something very different from the old people. The men will have something very different from the women. Yeah. You want that diversity. And so for me, it's been very important to have that exchange and be open and not intimidate your superior, the people who report to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Great points there. A few questions. William Dafoe is asking, how do you address our educational system today per the experience you have shared? Maybe your thoughts on our educational system. I think he said a few things about the quality of our educational system, but I'll leave that to Mr. Chairman to address that. The other question, I'll just give these two so that it doesn't confuse him. Mr. Awotwi, please, how were you able to stay put to your values while adapting to the new environment, since you can't always impose your values on others? Here you are with all the great values you've taken from England to US, and you're coming to Ghana. Into that, you talk about how you are surprised, people telling lies all over the place. How have you been able to, adapt? Have you been contaminated a bit or not?
Well, great questions both. In terms of education, we have a challenge of numbers and infrastructure, and maybe the story of infrastructure is the same, whether it's education or health or roads, or we're not keeping up with the infrastructure of education. Again, I mentioned in my time, I think Francois had probably about 900 people, a certain number of teachers. Now the school, same building, same classrooms, have 3,000 people. It's hard to see how that quality gets preserved. And I think we have the challenge. When you go to the universities, you have people sleeping on, outside and in wind. And you have lectures that you can't even get access. It's hard to do well with that.
You're using a microphone, a loudspeaker in the lectures.
It's hard to. So we have a real challenge, but at the same time, you can't just say, well, we'll have everybody come in and then give them a poor education. We've got to find a way. It's not straightforward, but I do think our education needs a lot of help. Some of the private schools are doing very well, as we know. The GISs, the Lincolns, the Soulclin. There are many. There are a number of schools who are Akosombo International. They are doing quite well, and they are competitive on the world stage. But our education really needs quality over quantity, from my point of view. And I think, just to finish that thought, they need more of that liberal arts ability to, because I'm an engineer, I still should learn how to write. I still should be exposed to the languages. One of the things I always remember, which sounds like an aside, I read Steve Jobs, as a biography written about him, and his success at Apple. He mentions that he knew a lot of things, so little things that connected. So he had a passion for calligraphy, and so he had a passion for design, even though he was a technical person. It's about connecting the dots. It's about finding, having enough breadth of education to identify or address the issues. So I wish we could do more of that, whether it's more writing, more exposure to other disciplines, even as we pursue our own. The second question had to do with values. And you know what? The Bible does say something about a good name is better than riches. I believe that too. It all depends, and it's easy for some of us to say it. This country is difficult economically, and sometimes it's easy to say, well, I want to make a quick buck, so today I'll make a wink at my values. If you can avoid that, avoid it. I know I've been fortunate. I come from a middle class background. My father was well educated. It's a shame when I see, and we see as people taking positions, especially in government, especially in politics, because that's where they will make their money. It's a real shame. Because those careers are very short.
Yeah.
4 years and you're gone. We need to think longer term than that. And, like I said, if I sat somewhere and, one president appoints me, and then 10 years later, another one, a different party appoints me, it says something about my values. Now, what people might not know about that is that it wasn't as if they were all very happy with my values.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, in both my terms as CEO and chairman, I got a lot of unhappy people around me because of my values.
Yeah.
That they said, but why are you doing it this way and not that way? And I would say, but this is the only way we can do it. But again, going back to my childhood, which Sam, you talked about, this sense of service to the country, sort of, it stays with me. Whatever we do, what's the point of helping my little corner and not the community at large? What's the point of that? So I sit in my castle and I tell the people, let them eat bread, and then they come and cut off my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I think that also answers the question of Mami, who is asking how you're adaptable and still keep your North Star. So I think that addresses it. Ebenezer is asking, when should we expect your book?
Yes, it's interesting. I've been asked that a few times. It's funny. I don't know yet. I think the answer is I don't know yet. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I'm much of a. I write well. I don't know whether I have enough of a book to write, though.
We can see so many books inside you from what we have heard today. So you must find a way to get them out of you.
So just to make a small point about writing, I remember my first newsletter when I was appointed the MD at Tullow, Ghana, and I wrote what I would normally write. I wrote my first, and the folks in London said, did he write that or did he have someone write that for him? Because they didn't expect an engineer to write that well. So anyway, back to our education and training.
Yeah. But I find that engineers actually do very well writing. One of my bosses, Anodepe, who was also an engineer who helped build EcoBank, he writes very well because they're very critical. They write succinctly. You talk about process and so on. So I'm sure you'll be a very good writer because I've been with you for some time and I see how you're very careful about what we're writing and what we are putting in and so on. Well, we're taking a lot of your time and we're getting to the end. I'm not seeing any questions. I see a lot of comments coming, encouraging comments. So I have one question, but before I come to that, my last question, I want to see if Sarah has something.
I just wanted to add that even the four of us, we have two engineers. Joy is also an engineer, so you can see her thought process as well.
Exactly.
I actually have a 30-second rapid fire for Mr. Awotwi. So Uncle Sam, if you ask your last question, then I'll do that when you are done.
Okay.
I'm in trouble.
So my last question is something that it's on my heart as regards to leadership at our national level. Let's just stay at the national because on the continental, it's a collection of the national level. I mean, at the corporate level, at your level, we have a lot of good quality leaders like you and some of you there. And you've been successful. But it seems you guys are quietly enjoying whatever you got. You don't want your reputation to be tainted. So although we know what is going on at the national level, it's not what we want, but everybody is quiet. How do we bring people like you into the discussion at the national level to be able to change a bit of the narrative at the leadership at the national level? What can people like you do or do more? I know probably doing a few things behind the scenes, but can we be a bit more? Can we do a bit more? Because I think that sometimes in our quiet moment, we should be thinking, are we really not fail in this country with all the skills you have, the competencies you have. And I'm sure if you were put in some ministry, you'll be there, but you are not NDC, you are not MPP, so nobody will put you there. How do we then navigate and bring this coalition of intellect to bear on the national leadership? That's my question. I don't know. You feel free to share what you think.
Look, I think it's a real question. I think there are many people who feel that the middle class has let Ghana down. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the political class is a class. It doesn't necessarily represent the country. The rest of us who are not in the political class must do a better job engaging, and we must do it, I would say, in a much more coordinated way with the civil service organizations, the civil society organizations, the media to a certain point of view. We, as you said, like to be quiet, but we can't afford to be quiet. So, and sometimes we need to be pushed and prodded, but there's no question that we need to be more engaged. Some of it is maybe the size of the country. We're a small country. Everybody knows everybody kind of thing. We're beholden to our families, etc. We don't want to cause trouble. There have been so many instances where the reaction has been, oh, I don't want to cause trouble. But we must find a way to cause trouble. I mean, all the major changes and movements in the world don't happen because someone says, oh, Joy is a nice person, let's do what she says. No, it doesn't happen that way. There's a lovely saying by Frederick Douglass, one of the big campaigners in the US, which I love. It says, power concedes nothing without a demand. And that's we must saying it is one thing, doing it is another, but we must find ways to, I think what I would say is, if we must find strength in the collective. If it's just you, it's difficult. But if it's you working with others in the community, in other organizations, in other, I think there's power in that.
Yeah. All right.
But
Thank you so much. We would take your last words, but let me see what Joy has.
Rapid fire questions.
Yeah, so 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. All right. So let's see. Let me just set my timer so that I don't go beyond. Okay. All right. So you don't have to answer, just choose one. Okay. All right. So let's go. So coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Would you do golf or soccer?
At this age, golf.
Okay. Are you a morning early bird or a midnight owl?
Definitely a midnight owl.
Okay. Ebook or paperback?
Paper.
Yes, of course. All right. Sweet or savory?
Oh, savory.
Savory. Okay. What is the furthest you have traveled from home?
Wow. Probably Australia or maybe China.
So
Probably Siberia. Yeah. Yeah.
My next question was, what is the most unusual place you have been? So I'm guessing it's Siberia. Okay. Okay. What question do you detest to be asked?
Oh dear. So many of them.
Just give us one.
Wow. What? No, I mean, I can't think of one necessarily.
He doesn't want that question to be answered.
Okay, the very last one. Would you skip a starter or would you skip a dessert?
Dessert.
Dessert. Okay. All right. I think we've gotten to know you a bit more with these answers. All right. Thank you so much. So over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you so much, Mr. Awotwi. It's been a blessing It's been an honor to have you spend this time with us and with our people. A lot of people are appreciating, they're encouraged by your story. And so we want to thank you so much. And we just want you to give us your your final words. I think we've short the time a bit. So
Yeah.
your
I think
final
I would say there's a lot of opportunity out there in the world. I wouldn't necessarily confine your vista to Ghana, but there's a lot we have to do in Ghana as well. My sense of it, or my view of it, is that the more you learn about the world around you, the more effective you can be in your own home country. But you need to step up, and you need to be able to compete with your peers in India and China, in North America and Asia. And that requires a lot of hard work, discipline, focus, and ambition.
Great. Thank you so very much. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been our edition of A Time with a CEO, and we have been privileged to have Mr. Awotwi. You can Google him and learn more. There's so much we could have learned from him, but we have a limited time, and we appreciate all of you for joining us. On that note, we will sign off this evening on the leadership platform and say have a good night. Let me just remind you, the book we are reading this month is Robin Sharma's book, The Leader Who Had No Title. The Leader Who Had No Title. Please get it, get an audio, get any version of it, and read with us until the end of the month when we come back to share the lessons with you. Good night. Tomorrow is Sunday. Fine place for God if you're a Christian, and go to church and go and serve God, serve your neighbor, and be a good person. Learn more about leadership and yourself and your personal growth. Have a good night.